Thinking about climate change and the prospect of peak oil. Because my house is a passive solar house tucked into the woods, I really didn't have the option of putting solar panels on my house. So it seemed to me if I was going to do something, getting an EV was probably the most constructive thing I could do. And at that point, the options were pretty narrow. Doing the conversion was the best possibility. I checked out some of the common conversion vehicles at the time, and the Chevy S10 pickup truck was getting a lot of action, Geo Metro, and there were several kits, EVs out of VW Beetles. Eventually gravitated towards a kit provided by Wilderness EV out in Utah. I chose to do the VW and drove it for a few months to get a feel for it as a vehicle. And I found that it needed the front suspension upgraded. This was a Super Beetle, but before it, they had moved to doing McPherson struts in the front. Thinking about adding a lot of weight to a car, I upgraded the suspension and replaced the floor pan in the rear. The kit included an adapter plate, the shaft coupler, the shunt motor, a switch box, a contactor, volt and amp meter, battery charger, throttle box, and controller. And on that list, I knew exactly what a battery charger was. Everything else was new to me. While I've driven cars since I was 16 years old, I was never much of a mechanic, but it was pretty exciting. Got a friend to help me pull the engine from the VW, and I also went to my friends at Third Sun Solar, and they bought me 12 6-volt lead-acid batteries. The car was still running, barely running. The front has batteries in it. So I set out to install the kit. First, I got some help building battery boxes. Here's looking at the front trunk of the car where the gas tank used to be. You can see the large charger on the left. That charges 72 volts. When I eventually upgraded to 96 volts, I added a second 24-volt charger. You can see the welded thing for the battery box and my handy little protective covers so I didn't rip my arms apart every time I reached across those exposed pieces of metal. You can see a little bit better the reinforcement on the fender there on the left to accommodate the McPherson struts. And this is a real close-up of the motor. is similar to that, only a little bit larger. Here is what the back seat looks like. I have 8 batteries there, along with the 4 in the front trunk, gave me 12 batteries. Initially, I was running on 72 volts. You can see the foam insulation around it, batteries, particularly lead acid, reasonably warm. The front is to draw in air from the outside, and then there's an escape tube in the back, so that the venting of the batteries, the gases would be carried out of the car and not accumulate in the car. There's normally a top on that. You can see the second battery box way back there, which I added later when I went to 96 volts. And you can see it's got a top on it. After installing the kit, I tested it out some, and I quickly concluded that the part of Utah where it must be absolutely flat for hundreds of miles. Could get up to 50 or 60 miles per hour with this kit. It could barely make it up, and with extreme effort. So
even in first gear?
Yes. Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah. I immediately upgraded to that motor I got from another company, D&D Motors. It's a much more substantial motor. The motor would be overheating when I go up long hills. I was afraid that I had probably damaged the motor. So I contacted the company, and the motor was still under warranty, and I was going to see if I could get them to swap it out for me for a bigger motor. So I packed it up, sent it off. By some quirk of fate, UPS managed to drop the package. An attachment to the motor, a mounting piece, was bent enough that I could take it to them and say, look, you ruined my motor that I was shipping back. So they actually paid me for the motor. UPS did. And they're insured for that stuff, so it's no skin off their nose. So I now have a semi-functional motor that I'm looking forward to at some point testing out further, and maybe even taking apart and learning a lot more about what they look like inside. But it's potentially a useful, though somewhat limited motor. I upgraded to the next larger size of that same motor. It's the same diameter as that one, only longer, so it has more copper windings inside of it, providing it with greater horsepower. That one was rated at 10 horsepower, and the one I upgraded to was rated at 18. The rating for electric motors is vastly different than the rating for gas power. I imagine it's two different lines of history, and no real compulsion to make them jive with each other. But as we move more and more into the electric car era, there is going to be more pressure to
electric motor to gas motor compared torque.
Electric motors have an incredible amount of torque. I upgraded to the final motor, the one I have in now, which is rated for 96 volts. I added those 4 more batteries you see in the back, and I also upgraded the controller, because the controller that I had that came with the kit was designed to work up to 72 volts. There you can see the back with the current motor in it, and this black device up here is the new controller. I installed a little fan when the motor was overheating. This is actually a potentiometer that's hooked by a cable through the floor to what used to be called the gas pedal. When I push down on that pedal, it moves the potentiometer that controls the controller. It all fits very nicely into the back of a Volkswagen, where a clunky old engine used to be. I drove this configuration for a little over 2 years. I had a business in the Eclipse Company town in the Plains, and I live out in Ames Township, so I would drive about 12 miles into my business plug it in to an ordinary 110 outlet. It would charge while I was working and drive it home. Worked really, really well, probably consumed maybe 2 or 3 kilowatt hours a day. Much beyond 200 amps, I was going to overheat the motor. So I learned to back off from that. I could run it in the range of 100 to 200 amps and really treat the motor nicely. I could remember at that time how many volts was equivalent to a 50% charge still left in the batteries. The maximum I ever ran on this was a 40-mile trip without recharging. And at that point, I think General Motors was talking about bringing out their Volt. And at that point, they were bragging that they would be able to provide a 40-mile range. So I felt like I was doing pretty good. Pretty good.
So when you got that 40 miles, was it getting pretty slow, or did it still seem all right?
No, it was still running okay. I didn't want to ever totally discharge. So I did have a couple of instances where something amiss happened while I was on the road, and I was able to pull over and debug the situation and get going again. And to imagine that I could have done that with a gas car is quite beyond me. So I felt like I was in control of the situation. It's a much simpler system to, once you understand it and work with it, to keep it running. And particularly a conversion like this. The newer ones that have multiple computers distributed throughout the car aren't nearly as accessible. But a conversion like this, I think a lot of backyard mechanics in our part of the country would really, really enjoy having cars like this and working on them and having the same sense of engagement and empowerment that they used to have when they were doing, old Chevys.
Will your VW recharge on coasting?
No. Actually, that controller, I could have incorporated that in, and I had thoughts about doing that, and when I use that controller, I may incorporate that feature.
Yeah.
The current controller I have does not have that capacity. Part of the kit was this adapter plate and shaft coupler, which actually marry the existing transmission to any variety of electric motors, actually.
I heard you had to have a manual transmission. You couldn't have an automatic to convert to electric, no?
Having a manual transmission, which the old Volkswagen did, but without a clutchless shifting, worked just fine for me. And in fact, even with gas-powered Volkswagens, quite a few people learn how to do clutchless shifting just for the fun of it.
Save wear and tear on the clutch. I did it for years.
What temperature is extremely bad for your DC engine?
The outer part of the motor was too hot to touch.
Yeah.
I think it's about 350 degrees or something. It's pretty hot.
It's amazing. If you're pushing a lot of amps through those wire coils, it heats up pretty fast. My EV saga entwines with my personal life. I had open heart surgery. I was laid off from life, recovering, first physically and then financially. It was almost 2 years before I could turn my attention back to the car. The batteries were 6 years old, they'd been neglected, and they would not come back to life. If I moved to some sort of lithium batteries, which would be much, much lighter, have much greater power density. With this, I've got about 1,100 pounds of lead acid batteries in there, and I probably pulled out 250 or 300 pounds of motor and other things, so a net gain of at least 800 pounds. With 2 passengers, I'm absolutely at the weight limit for the car, even with the reinforced shock absorbers. That definitely puts a strain on the motor to be carrying that much weight. So I looked at various lithium batteries and really liked the lithium ion phosphate batteries. They don't self-ignite in the way that most lithium-ion batteries do. They're much safer. They have at least as good a power-weight ratio. While I would be able to drop down from 1,100 pounds to probably 300 or 400 pounds on my battery pack, which would be a huge gain, it would set me back about $4,000. So that brought me up short. I started doing research on Second Life batteries. They're starting to appear on the market, coming out of EVs and coming out of computers. If you have the time and patience to get your hands on a lot of laptop batteries, generally they'll have one bad cell amongst the whole set of them. You can take them apart, test them cell by cell, and construct a battery pack of whatever size you want, lithium batteries. And I'm looking forward to doing that and probably assembling about 600 of those little individual cells.
Where will you get them?
They're for sale on eBay. From what I've been reading, I should be able to put together the basic battery pack for about $300, but I'm certainly going to be able to get the car rolling for less than $1,000.
How do you get equally matched cells that aren't like one much larger than another? So the batteries are all the same from the same manufacturer?
I think so.
The cells individually have the same chemistry.
There are more and more of these flooding the market, and it's a real quandary. What can we do with these to not to just throw them in a landfill? And often they'll have a great deal of their capacity remaining. Batteries coming out of EVs, they have 80% of their capacity still when it's recommended that they be replaced. Finding uses for Second Life batteries is going to be a major industry, I think. Some of our rural communities like ours might well adapt to playing a role in it. Since the car sat for several years, Morgan and I have pulled together the rudiments of a little test bench to test the components, and we've confirmed that the motor and the controller and all the related components work just fine. So it's sitting there just waiting for batteries. It would have been a whole lot easier if I had been part of a group doing this and there were at least a few knowledgeable, experienced people. And if EV conversions are going to become a reality, it would behoove us to undertake some social organizing, get together the physical facility for an EV conversion garage and some sort of cooperative organization where we could help each other do this. In addition to commercial EVs, certainly the used price is coming down. There's a whole other market segment for that conversions could, I think, fulfill and would be particularly appealing to our part of the country where we have a lot of backyard mechanics and we have a lot of still usable car frames sitting around. There are real possibilities to organize both on the technical level and on the social level. The final conversion was probably 3 months, and that was while I was working. It was weekends and evenings.
Right.
However, the several cycles I went through in replacing and upgrading things occurred over about a 2-year time period.
Wow.
So I did a lot of learning. That little red thing on the side, it's actually part of a fuse. If anything went awry, I could flip a switch and the whole system would totally shut off. An important safety feature.
Never had to do
Kill
that.
switch.
One thing that people are already doing, even with the odd configuration that these batteries are coming in, they're building enclosures and slapping them on the wall and saying, this is a power wall. That conversion is even easier to do.
The Nissan Sentra has a similar body frame to a Nissan Leaf. Leafs are hatchback. They might make a Sentra hatchback, but I think it's size-wise supposed to be very similar in same capacity. It'd be interesting if you could take a Sentra and mount batteries on that.
That would be your son Ren's high school senior project.
Great idea. This guy that got a Leaf battery from the salvage yard, and he took
took it apart to the like cell level, or little like book-sized things, and split it with 3 friends. And he was going to use them on a scooter. They seem pretty modular.
I don't think I'm going to give up my Leaf battery at 80%. I'm going to use mine down a lot farther than that. Just because they say I'm supposed to change it doesn't mean that I will do that.
The fellow that talked at the library the other night said the Leaf has 18 CPUs.
So we're all learning about all this stuff.
Great adventure.
This is pretty important stuff. I was a mechanic for a long time. I tell everybody I got too much grease on me, and that's why I'm into electrics now. The story really begins where I had a shop, and a lady came in one day and she asked me what I thought of electric cars, and I said, oh, I think they're ridiculous. They're just going to build all these nuclear power plants to power up all these cars. And she says, well, maybe you could use solar panels. That really turned me on, you know. The idea of solar panels and electric cars was what did it for me. Having been a mechanic for so long, I really got tired of the awful designs, and the American car companies were admitting that they were making bad cars in the 80s and all. So I had this secret desire to build a vehicle. About 2010, I would drive from Meigs County, where I live, up to Athens to do my errands and stuff like that. And I would drive by Dovetail Solar, and I used to work on cars for Matt. And Matt always had these weird cars. He would just get strange cars. So I thought, well, one day I'm going to stop in there and ask him about building a car in the back of his shop. And I kept nixing the idea, saying, I'll walk in there, I'll say, yeah, I'd like to do that, but insurance and da-da-da, or whatever, you know. Finally, one day, I stop at Dovetail. First time I've ever been there. And I'm walking back to Matt's office, and I say, hey, Matt, you know, I've been a mechanic for a long time. You've always had weird cars. What do you think about building an electric vehicle in the back of your shop? He says, sure, let me show you around. So, total surprise. So we walked around and he showed me all his scrap aluminum and stuff that he had in the back. And that's where I built the electrocycle. Originally it had a foam body. The frame was made out of this scrap racking material they had. My idea was to use biofoam for the body. Because I thought, well, biofoam, that would be a good product for farmers to grow, you know, get the agricultural part of things going there. So I made the body out of great stuff, foam. And that was pretty nice for a couple of years, nice and light, and you could form it so we could sculpt it and all. And then one day I was soldering with a torch and it started catching on fire. And it went fast. And so I realized that, well, this isn't a good idea. I'm sure that there could be some kind of a biofoam that would have a flame retardant and all like that. But I still like the idea of a foam body because I think it would be energy absorbent. But the original electrocycle used what's called a wheel motor. The motor and the wheel are all one thing. And then you just run the wires out from the wheel motor to your controller, and it's a very simple system. It was my first experiment ever with anything electric. And it would go close to 60 miles an hour. Wow. It was, which amazed me. I haven't been able to duplicate that with any other motors. I've changed the motors several times. So you're going to ask, well, why'd you get rid of the original wheel motor? Well, the problem is it didn't have any startup torque. So if I would back into even a little slight ditch or something like that, I couldn't pull out. Because a wheel motor is one turn of the motor is one turn of the wheel. If you drive a standard shift car, it'd be the equivalent of starting out in fourth gear. My next idea was, well, I'll get this company that offered me the first wheel motor also offers what they call a Buick wheel motor. So I thought, oh, if this is going to run a Buick, this will run my little vehicle. Well, I got that, and it didn't even perform as well as the original one. So from there, what I did was I took one of those wheel motors and I combined it with a a planetary gear system out of an automatic transmission. And this gave me a 3-to-1 gear reduction, and that worked real well. The only problem was my top speed was only 25 miles an hour, because it was like driving around a first gear all the time. So I gained my torque for starting off, but I lost the top end, which with that same wheel motor, it's about 45. First wheel motor was smaller in diameter, and I think that's why I got it up to 60 miles an hour. Now, I got off from that planetary gear system with the one wheel motor, and now I'm using a D&D motor, like this one here over here. And that seemed, it was just an experiment. I got it because, well, I spent the winter time with Matt Bennett down in North Carolina where he bought some property. And we had ideas of starting a vehicle company down there. We met last November with a group that, we had an engineer in it, we had people that were in the media, we had an investor. Well, it never went anywhere. But Matt and I hung out a lot last winter talking about vehicles and all. And so while I was down in North Carolina, I ordered one of those motors there. Didn't get a chance to put it on the electric cycle till this spring when I was back up here. Originally it was just an experiment. I never intended to keep it on there permanently. But it did work pretty well, and now I've decided to keep it, so I've tightened everything up and made everything a little more permanent. It actually does pretty well. What I've just finished in Tupper's Plains now is a solar charging station, because I have one down on my land which is off-grid. I was more or less half solar charged with my car. The car is the Sun Cruiser. It has 300 watts worth of panels on top of it. It has 2 wheel motors in the back. So it's got a bit more startup torque. It's got a higher top end, go out 52 miles an hour, and that's my daily drive. That's what I drive all the time. My land is about 6.5 miles away from my shop. With this solar charging station, I can now have a vehicle that's totally solar powered. So this makes me feel really good. If you're plugging in the grid around this area, you're just using coal, is what you're doing. So that's the big drawback with electric vehicles plugging in. So the solar panels really are the trick. The other thing I did with this charging station in Tupper's Plains is I'm using a system what I call direct charge, which means that normally like the one I have down on the land, the panels collect the sun during the day, transfer the energy through the charge controller into the battery bank that's in this charging station. Then from the batteries, it goes into an inverter. From the inverter, it goes out to the car. It goes through the battery charger, and then from the battery charger, it's turned back into DC. So I've got all these motors, or fan motors, whirring on all these different devices, and I just don't like it. It just seems like too much stuff. So the beauty of this direct charge system, and I tried it for the first time yesterday, I thought it was really miraculous. It was the perfect day for it. The panels take the sunlight, turn it into electricity, runs it through the charge controller, and then out of the charge controller it goes right into the batteries in the vehicle. So there's no noise, no charge controller in it. And I think that has possibilities too, eliminate the charge controller as well, but you'd have to monitor it all day long. So the best thing is to have the charge controller. But like I say, very, very simplistic system. The biggest drawback is if it's a cloudy day, you're not going to charge.
How many watts of solar do you have?
I have 1,140 watts.
Okay.
And I got a good deal on some panels. They're called Top Point, right out of Florida. And these are 190 watt panels, and I got them for $130 a piece, which I thought was pretty good. I think the math brings it up to about 70 cents a watt.
Yes.
And then the charge controllers I'm using, $13. They're little cheap Chinese ones.
Are they designed for solar application?
Yeah, they're MPPT. So I'll see how they work out. Money's always been an issue for me. Being able to do this stuff for the least cost is really important. Eventually, I'm going to probably have to use batteries inside that Tupper's Plains charging station, because that's just the way it is. If it's cloudy or several days of cloudy weather, you're still going to have a charge and then you build up that charge of your batteries, and then you take out your batteries, run it through your inverter, then through your battery charger, da da da.
You were to just add up the price of the panel plus the DC, what would that all amount to?
What do I have spent on this direct charge station?
Yeah.
It was free shipping on these panels.
Nice.
So that's 1,140 watts, 6 panels. I paid 130 apiece, so I think it was 737.
Okay.
The 6 charge controllers came out to like about $75. But then you would just need to come up with a battery pack.
If you were to just do the DC charge, and while it's not 100% all the time, 24/7 power access, you still could use it most of the time, right?
And even on a cloudy day, you're going to get some charging.
Something, right.
So,
Can you carry
well,
it
the
with
thing-
you so you can charge in the daytime at your workplace?
Yeah. The thing is, though, when I drive to Tupper's Plains, it's an everyday thing. I got to get home at night. And that's why I always plug into the grid.
Yeah.
I plug it into the grid. These lead acid batteries are slow to take a charge. I only go 6.5 miles, and it takes me about 2.5 hours to charge that back. So it takes a long time. The advantage of flooded lead acid batteries is they're cheap, but they're heavy, and they take a long time to charge.
Could you see doing the laptop computer cells that Roger was talking
I
about?
totally want to follow Roger's lead on this, because I was checking out lithium batteries, and the best price I found was, and they were bragging on the internet about having the cheapest prices, 100 amp hour batteries, and I would need 72 volts of them. They were offering that battery pack with you have to have a special charger with lithium batteries. And you also have to have, you don't have to, but it's advised to have a battery management system. And what that battery management system does is make sure that they're all fully charged. So if you charge your batteries in series, you might have a weak one, and then you might have a stronger one, and you're not charging them to the same level. And it's also part of the reason why I've done this system. I have 6 batteries, 6 panels, 6 charge controllers. So each panel has its own charge controller, has its own battery in the vehicle. In a sense, that balances it a little bit, because what's going to happen is the weak battery is still going to take a full charge from the panel. The stronger battery is going to charge up, and then the charge controller will taper it off. That was my homemade method for balancing the batteries.
Can you equalize the cells going while it's voltage up?
It'll do it on its own, because the weaker battery will keep, the panel will keep charging all the way, because it'll keep trying to pump it up higher and higher. Whereas the strong battery, the charge controller will taper off then. You just slam the juice to it, you force feed it, and they all off gas, and it's pretty harsh. So
That's a lot longer to do it.
yeah, so that's why I like this idea of the individual panel, individual charge controller. I suppose that if I was sophisticated enough in electronics, the way it would work is you would take the panel that's working less because its battery's all charged up and transfer some of its energy into the weak battery. It's the weak batteries get more of the energy. It was real exciting to me yesterday to try for the first time to do this, and it charged all day long. My batteries are having a problem now. I've only got about 4,000 miles on them, but they're having, I got in a wreck, I think that hurt them, and different issues have happened. I think my batteries are kind of damaged. So once upon a time, the battery charger would charge them up, and then it would just taper off. Well, it doesn't do that anymore. It just keeps charging and charging. If I could charge it for a week, and it would just keep charging and charging. I don't know what happened. It just won't do its thing. You know, initially, this battery charger would charge up. You know, that's called constant current. It charges up, and then when it hits its peak voltage, it'll go to constant voltage, and it'll start dropping down. Well, it won't do the drop down now. So I don't know what's going on with those batteries. They did work once upon a time, they don't anymore. I can't afford a new set, so I'm still running them. So what I'm doing now is I just have a timer. I know that it takes about 2.5 hours to fully charge them. I just set the timer at 2.5 hours. They're in series, yeah. I pulled those batteries out of there so many times, I don't know what's going on with them. Really, I'd really like to get the lithium batteries. Hopefully, they'll come up with a better battery pretty soon. The oil companies were controlling the solar market for a long time, as long as they could. They know that their end is coming with solar panels and wind energy. It's just that there's no way to store the juice. There is a better battery out there, and you can figure someone's suppressing it, because that would be it. There's so many good ideas out there that just get suppressed. Down in Florida, you can't cut the cord to the electric company. You have to pay the electric company even if you're totally solar powered. And in Arizona as well. And this stuff would work out there. We need to go back to having vehicles that people can work on themselves. Getting a Leaf is the way to go if you don't want to really be doing nuts and bolts stuff and all. A Leaf, I think, is a pretty good idea. You can get those things for what? Less than $10,000 with hardly any miles on it. But I don't know what the technology is involved there. And these are car companies, and so you know that they're not going to make it too easy to work on. That's a big motivation behind me working on these vehicles, is I want to have an ultra simple vehicle that's just a runabout and jump in. So I drove it around up and down State Street, and it's kind of clunky. But it is a simple vehicle, pretty simplistic technology compared to an internal combustion engine, which is tremendously complicated. I mean, you've got so much precision with the pistons and the rings and the bearing surfaces. It's just all very precision stuff. And how they can make an internal combustion engine for so cheap, I don't really understand. Well, I mean, I do understand. It's because they make so many of them. But eventually, electric motors will get that way. Because an electric motor is really a simple type of motor. You just have a rotor and you have your field windings around it. And so basically all you have is a couple of bearings on each end of the shaft. There's no reason why electric motors should be as costly as they are. And it's not the materials, it's the effort that goes into making these windings. I think we're going to see more and more electrics. The big problem with electrics is charging. Even your Tesla, I think, takes, 2 hours to charge up? Fast charge a Tesla. You can drive all the way across the country with them and get free charging.
They were on a level 2 charger, which is a little less capacity. That's more like a 2-hour charge, but still much quicker. A Leaf on a level 2 charger is an 8-hour charge. So yeah, it's way quicker. But
this is a big problem with the electrics is the time factor. For me, I kind of think it's a nice idea for everybody to think about rearranging their lives. We have it so easy with you go up, you put a bunch of gas in your car, and you go, and it's rather miraculous. But I don't have to explain to anybody here the problems that are coming from using fossil fuel. Electric is really the way to go. The way I see it going, if we want to have the convenience that we have with filling with fossil fuel, is to have cassette-type batteries. So you can pull up to a place, pull out the old one, throw a new one in there, and then these batteries can go to a solar field where solar panels charge them up. That's where I see things going if we want to make it work on a practical basis, unless we come up with a new battery that will just be this miraculous battery that will be an infinite battery that never wears out, and you can charge it up in 15 minutes or something.
Could you talk a little bit about the reason you went designing your own vehicle route instead of converting?
Why did I build my own vehicle?
Yeah.
From having been a mechanic and having struggled on so many vehicles and wondering why people build things that way. And actually, it's kind of curious, on the Sun Cruiser, which is my car, I've got some stuff like that. And I realized, well, the reason I made it this way was just for convenience to put this together and get it running. If I were going to produce a car, I would keep the mechanic in mind. For the most part, the stuff I've made is fairly simple. And I do enjoy working on it. People buy these old cars and they're really expensive, and I think they're buying them just because you can't get stuff like that. There's this life engineering that goes on, where they build stuff and then these life engineers get in there and they carefully make sure that everything is just going to last so long, so it breaks down. You have to buy another one, which is not good for the ecology of the planet. That's good, I guess, for the stockholders.
It's called capitalism.
I guess that's my frustration. So when you say, why did I want to build one from scratch? That's the reason why. It's like, I want to build something that's simplistic.
You're not relying on all the design decisions that went into making a gas car.
I would like to see something as simple as possible. And that's a niche market. Because I was talking to someone about this Elio, it's a three-wheeled gas car. And apparently you can get it for no money. You don't have to pay any money for it. And you get a special card that you pay 3 times the cost of gas with this special card. And that's how you pay for the vehicle. And then also you pay for the different things inside the car, like, I suppose, internet. And I don't know all kind of things because I don't do that. I don't even use a radio in my car. But apparently enough people rely on all these techie things in their car that they're willing to pay for that. The car was a little trickier. The motorcycle didn't even ask for a picture. I don't know, I guess they think you're crazy if you ride a motorcycle anyway, so whatever you want to ride. But I had to send a picture in an insurance company for the car. So they said, okay, that's a car. Driving the electrocycle around today up and down State Street, it's like, it was a horrible ride. It's like, hit those bumps and charge my feelings loose, So it's got a long ways to go. There's sort of a passion. You have a problem, you engage the problem, you work it out, and then, I don't know, it feels good. Anybody that wants to go electric, I think that Leaf is the way to go. Carol Beal has been driving her Leaf for years and years off solar panels.
There's an electric motorcycle in town.
Yeah, I talked to her the other evening also.
And Wenda Shute has an EV four-wheeler that's pretty cool, like for her off-road acreage and driving on her acreage. She loves it.
Yeah.
Really high-powered, can climb up anything.
Yeah, and I was talking to Ben Lockman, he's got a Leaf, about 6.5K. He says the same thing that I say. It's fun. There's something fun about doing this. And I think what it is on a subconscious level, we know things aren't right. We know that the planet is getting polluted, but yet we're so dependent on vehicles, we've got to have them. It wasn't that way 150 years ago. We didn't go much further than maybe 10 miles from where you live. So we're kind of trapped. I pulled the electrocycle up here today in the back of a 1-ton box truck. Now, that feels bad. I would prefer if I could just take care of all my necessities just within 10 miles of where I live. If we're going to do something about the situation we have, we're going to have to start rearranging our lives so that we can take care of things locally, use local economies and take care of our needs locally and just plan our lives. When I do my wash, I try to wait till the sun's at the peak so that when I'm using the washing machine, I'm mostly using the solar panels. Might be more convenient to do my wash at 10 o'clock at night, which I could do. But, I've only got 600 watts worth of panels, so I have to rearrange my life to compensate for this, but it's okay. Because when you do that, you realize that it might not be as convenient as when you got gobs and gobs of electricity coming in, but there's something fun about it. Because it's empowering. You realize that we're not helpless, that we're not trapped, that we can use our freedoms to live our lives in a little different way. Walk where we can, bicycle where we can, make whatever changes we can. Because overall it's going to make everything better. And that's how the corporations understand things, is if you don't buy the products. Or you just refuse to go along with it. So I guess that's why I built my own vehicles. Should we walk outside?
Yeah.
I think that's a good plan.
I go right for this. I'm like, hey, can I plug in my meter, guys? And I'm like, just check out.
You got the whole show?
Got the whole show.
It's a three-wheeler.
Yeah, it's a motorcycle.
Guitars, keyboardist, bass.
So, you can see it's pretty simple. You've only got about 4 major components with this. You have the throttle up there, and then your throttle sends your signal to your controller, and your controller takes the juice out of the batteries and sends it to the motor. And that's about all you really have for your drivetrain.
So that's not
Wonderfully
very
simple.
many batteries, is it? You said
That's
six?
6 12-volt batteries, so this is a 72-volt system, which is what you start out with, Roger, right?
Right, yeah, cycle battery, right.
These are deep cycle batteries. They're like, I think they're 105 amp hours. So this was about $1,000 battery. I bought it just a few months ago. And they've been pretty good, and I'll tell you something about lead-acid batteries. You have to be real first. First set of batteries I got, they were all discharged. I thought, oh, well, that's no good. So I started charging them, and I said, wait a minute, I paid for good batteries. I should get good batteries. So I called them up. I says, these batteries, shouldn't they be charged when I get them? They says, oh yeah. So they sent me on another set. Well, that set was charged up on 5 cells. The 6th cell was dry. And the sides were heaved out. So I says, well, I know what happened here. They took the same kind of batteries they sold me before and they just slammed the charge to them. So I called them up again. I says, look, you know, and I was going to make those work. I put water in a dry cell and start charging. I said, wait a minute. I paid for brand new batteries. I should get, so these came fresh from the factory. And these are good batteries.
She'll substitute it dry and have you put the electrolyte in them when you got them. Then you know what you got.
That would be good.
That's what you don't really go to a place to buy a battery. A lot of times they're empty and you
well, motorcycle batteries, they come that way, but they don't do it with car batteries. So I asked the battery company where I got these from, I says, can I get a dry battery? He says, no, but you can't get that because they send them, they ship them out wet. It's probably because you have to have a specific amount of electrolyte in there, and they don't want people just putting it in themselves and putting too strong electrolyte in, and then it'll eat up the battery.
It won't eat the battery up, but it'll get the right chemistry.
So this is everything you added?
What's that now?
You switched the motor out?
Yeah, so this motor, when they sold it to me, they said it needs a 6-to-1. So henceforth, I can change my gear ratio right here with these two. This here, I could change this gear here and get some, but this is actually come down to about 5-to-1 because at 6-to-1 I wasn't getting the speed I wanted to get. And one of my tests that I would do is I would pull up this test hill right outside my shop in Tupper's Plain, and I pull part way up, put on the brake, and then try to get going again. And as long as I can get going again, I feel good about it. Because that's a critical thing. If you get on one of these hills, let's say you get on Madison Hill, and you have to come to a stop and you can't get started again, you're going to cause, a safety hazard. So it's real important to be able to get going. So this does pretty well. And I think this is the same motor you have, isn't it, Roger?
That looks very similar to the one I have sitting in there. It's a 15A.
Let me see. I think it's an ES. I think it is an ES15A.
Yeah. If it's 72 volt, that almost certainly.
Yeah.
And this looks very much like that Altrax controller I have in there.
It is.
Yeah.
D&D or will sell you the controller with it. They're not in the business of selling controllers, but they sell it as a convenience. When you buy their motor, they'll sell you the controller. And also for a cheaper price than you can get it from other places.
Yeah. They're a good company, I think.
Yeah, they're pretty good. They're really trying hard.
So you only got 5-to-1 on the motor instead of 6-to-1.
Yeah, they told me to use 6-to-1. He did. They configure it. You can't call up D&D and just buy a motor from them.
Yeah. Well, the DC motors are critical. They draw maximum amount of power, 0 speed. If it doesn't get up enough speed to get back EMF on this controller, the motor get fried. That's hard on them.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're trying to prevent, is there being any confusion.
Even golf carts and stuff, you got step starters in there and resistors. You put full armature amps on that thing at a low speed.
Yeah.
That's hard on the battery. It's hard on everything.
Yeah.
You're just pulling so much current.
Yeah, this seems to work really great. Like I say, this was originally just an experiment. I didn't expect to keep this on here. I thought I was going to pull it off, and that's why it doesn't look any better than it does. I had to make extensions to go back here to put that wheel on, because the wheel motor I'm going to show you fit right up here. And so it was a lot shorter than it is now. But I'm going to pull these wheel motors out of the back.
No, that's just protects from riprap and stuff.
He does have it, yeah, okay, I was.
No bugs
I
getting
guess
in.
that's the way you close it.
Yeah, right.
Here's that first wheel motor I was talking about. Yeah, this is actually would go for a little motorbike, and I mean it would probably take you up to about 90 miles an hour. Yeah. Yeah. So this is pretty good. Like I say, I think the reason why it works so well, I think this motor is the same one as maybe in there, except that the wheel is made right onto it.
Oh, okay.
But I think this is a 7K motor and that one's a 7K too. But this really did the job as far as pushing me down the road and getting me the speed on flat ground.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be the type of thing I'd want to come to a halt on a hill and try to get going again. So from there,
Can't change the gear ratios in that either.
well, that's right, and that's why. That's why I went to this thing here. Now here you basically got your wheel motor right there. So normally there's 5 lug bolts in here, and that's where your wheel would bolt right on it. And then this wheel would turn, and you get 1 revolution of the wheel with 1 revolution of the motor. Well, once again, no startup torque. So what I did was I took this planetary gear system here, and so it mounts here, and then with that you get a 3-to-1 gear ratio right through this. So I thought, oh, that's really good. When I had a direct drive onto this wheel motor, I'd try to go out of the garage, and I couldn't even back out of the garage. It was just a slight incline. I couldn't even do that. I had to open the door and push with my foot. When I first put this planetary gear system on, I floored it, and I left a patch of rubber in it. So I knew I was going in the right direction. But like I say, the problem with this was 25 miles an hour, maybe 30 miles an hour is my top speed, because I'm always in first gear. So now,
you got your transmission, right?
Yes.
there you go. So now what I'm working on is I'm taking one of those motors and I'm hooking it up with a CVT, which is just tell Morgan about. It's like a variable speed transmission. It's belt driven. So I feel pretty good about that. I can't rig it on that vehicle there, so I have to build a whole other vehicle. So that's...
That like using expanding pulleys and belts
Yes,
and stuff.
yeah,
There's a lot
it
of
does.
friction in that, though, the problem with those. It's a lot of energy.
Yeah, I can show you a picture of this.
Reeves driving the control.
See, and it opens up once it starts going. And that's that variable speed transmission there. And I understand it'll go up to 75 miles an hour, which means load on the ground will probably get, what, 45 miles an hour.
Awesome. So, is it actually in a spring?
No,
Can't quite tell.
it's just the drivetrain
Okay.
sitting on a bench. Is
Okay.
basically what it's doing.
Go to Google, there's a Dutch car made back in the 60s, and they took these called DAF, D-A-F.
Okay.
They sold a lot of them that use that very.
Did it?
First time I ever saw that used.
I'm hoping to get some money together to build a vehicle around this drivetrain, which I spent all my money on the charging station. So it's going to take me some time to time to pay that off. But I feel hopeful about this. There's more and more interest being developed around these electric vehicles. Just today, there were several times when I went in a store today driving this thing, I came out and there's a whole bunch of people gathered around.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Is this based on anything that you've seen anywhere before?
No.
Oh, well, great.
Yeah.
With the transmission?
That'll,
Yeah. Well, I mean the whole drivetrain.
the combination.
Because what I used with it also was a right angle gearbox. Well, not only space, but durability. So if you've got a chain drive, which would make the most sense, motorcycle chains are subject to road grit and all that. So I like the idea of building a vehicle that you don't have to work on. Because it's made, you know, so durable and, you know, so well made that you just don't have to repair it very often. But that's my goal. I know I probably don't make a very good capitalist. That's what I'm after.
A lot of the gearboxes, you have to watch what kind of gears you use, because the worm drive gearbox, they suck up a lot of energy.
Yeah, no, it's not. This is not worm drive. It's just bevel gears. Is what it is. So, and it's a little heavier than I would like. It's like 23 pounds, which is going to add to the weight of the vehicle considerably and stuff. But I don't know if I can come up with some money to build the rest of the vehicle to go with. It'll be a three-wheeler like that, but it won't have panels on it. What it's going to do is just be a cockpit that you just step in a cockpit, no doors. Very simplistic.
How much energy do the panels add? Like 10% or?
What do you mean energy do they add to what?
To run.
To help me go?
Yeah.
I mean, actually, when I drive my car, it has 300 watts of panels on it, and it might be my imagination, but when it's a sunny day, I do feel it runs a lot better. Well, I'm getting 300 extra watts, you know. So 300 extra watts isn't a whole lot, but I'm getting that constantly while I'm going down the road. As a matter of fact, when I had my first set of batteries in the Sun Cruiser, the batteries went dead on me, and I was coming into Tupper's Plains, and I realized that if I just gave it a very little throttle, I could keep going just on the panels alone, which turned out to be 1 mile an hour, which is, curiously enough, there are 300 watts of panels. I was using about 300 watt hours per mile, so the math worked out exactly right, you know. The panels, on a very bright day, were able to push that vehicle at 1 mile an hour. That's my shop in Tupper's Plains there.
Right. Do you service other people's cars still?
No, I don't do that. Heat up, like I say, it's been in a couple wrecks.
Going to the pawpaw.
Yeah. That's the hook for the winch.
You have a boat winch
Yeah.
in your truck.
Yeah.
So you turn it around
Yeah.
and just pull it up.
Yep.
And you're off.
Thank you, sir.
Yay!